teaching. In her recently released memoir titled A Full Life, she shares with the world her experiences in TV, theatre, radio, and etiquette training. All of this while managing a beautiful family. We are joined today also by Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Again, I don't think that needs an introduction, but again, I've been given this responsibility so I will um, uh, take a go at it, Dr. Tharoor. An author, a politician, and a former international diplomat. I resist that word former though. Dr. Shashi Tharoor straddles several worlds of experience, currently a third term Lok Sabha Member of Parliament representing the Thiruvananthapuram constituency and chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology. Dr. Tharoor has previously served as Minister of State for Human Resource Development and Minister of State for External Affairs in the Government of India. He's by far, I'm sure there are a lot of contenders, but by far one of the most popular politicians India has produced globally. And sitting in Singapore today, I can vouch for it. So thank you very much, Sabira Merchant and Dr. Shashi Tharoor for joining us today. May I now start this conversation by a very quick remark from you, Dr. Tharoor, on what brings you to this conversation today. What is special? Set the context of a full life with Sabira Merchant for us. Dr. Tharoor, can you hear me? I think we have a bit of a technical glitch there. Akash, may I request you to connect with John? Now, let me come back to Sabira Merchant. Ma'am, you have the first word. And the lady opens, the lady of the hour, the lady of the day, and the evening opens. Tell us about this book, set the context, ma'am, and then we move into the conversation deeper.
Well, it all started a few years ago. And, as you said earlier on, I teach. So I have a special manual that I designed. And it was people's idea that this manual should be published and it should be available to people to learn how to speak better English, kind of improve yourself, etc. But then when I went to JICO, I got this idea saying this book would be very dry and really not accepted by everybody. So why not write about my life, which I thought was more interesting and more fulfilling than reading this manual of mine? So that's how the idea came about. And that's how I approached JICO, or JICO approached me. And then we got onto the idea of writing a kind of a biography. And there it is. And that's how the full life came to being.
Fantastic. I'm told it's a very easy read for people who read enough, and there is a lot more to take away for anyone who's picking this book up. So if you are looking for this for a journey of excellence in theater, radio, and more, please pick this up. And Jaco is here to give that up. So may I now invite Dr. Tharoor. Thank you very much, Sabira Merchant, for that opening. May I now invite Dr. Tharoor. Dr. Tharoor, what brings you to this evening of a full life?
Well, I've actually known Sabira since I was a kid in Bombay in the 60s. I've seen her on stage. You know, I think it was Pratap Sharma's The Word, but it could be something else. Certainly seen her in a couple of Shakespeare productions. There was an incredible theatre group in Bombay with people like Jason Cunha and Arik Padamsi and so on, stars who we've all lost very recently in the last few years, but who really enthralled audiences in the English-speaking crowd in Bombay. And my fascination for theatre began first in the audience, and then I became a student of Pearl Padamsi's. When she started the first ever drama classes at Campion School, Bombay, I was in her first batch. So watching Sabira, watching her in action, and then of course, because through Pearl, I also got invited to some of these gatherings of these wonderful theatre people. I got to meet her socially occasionally. I'm afraid I left Bombay by the end of the 60s, so I missed this whole business of Sabira becoming this famous television personality with What's the Good Word. because that would have brought us together too, the fondness for words. But it was so nice to recently rediscover her at the launch of Khalid Ansari's book in Bombay, which I launched and Sabira read excerpts from. It was lovely catching up with her after all these years. I'm just delighted to be part of this celebration of her life, because the autobiography really is a celebration of a remarkable life, all the way from teen bride to television star to etiquette trainer for world beauties, and I think it's marvelous that she now has a chance to present her book and through it her own story to an audience in this country, and I'm very happy to help her do it.
Thank you very much. That was lovely. And uh, Sabira Merchant, ma'am,
Yes.
you have, as people say that, you are the epitome of, or the definition of ladylike, as they say that, you need to be
Oh.
ladylike. You are the epitome, and we think of you when we say it's ladylike. But let's go back to your roots, as Dr. Tharoor was talking about. Your association with theatre world goes back to the days of recreation of a streetcar named Desire to the current date. Take us back to those dates and share your journey.
Well, actually started as Shashi said with The Word, which was a play written by Pratap Sharma. And I remember acting so vividly in that because it was my first production. And I was the mother of three children, and I was playing the role of a schoolgirl. So it was not a challenge because I looked very young and I passed off as a teenager. And coming down that precarious rope ladder, I remember in the auditorium, and it was an amazing scene because the audience didn't have chairs to sit on or stools. They sat on empty crates that were turned upside down because this place was resembling a nuclear fallout shelter. And this was crates of food that they had gathered in the underground shelter. And this young girl from the outside world comes down the rope ladder, swinging away. And practicing was a different thing, but being there on the stage with this ladder really swinging back and forth was so dangerous. And I'll tell you a very funny story about that time, Shashi. That was really, when you come down your dress, people can see up your dress, right? And we didn't think about, I didn't think about that. Pearl hadn't thought about it. Alec hadn't thought about it. And I said, oh my God, this I can't do at the rehearsal. So we promptly got a set of bloomers. Those old bloomers that we used to wear with the gathers around the knees and stuff like that. So that was an attempt to save my modesty as such. And that was a very funny moment for my first production, but we got excellent reviews. And Shashi, in those days, there was that Mr. Matthews. I don't know if you remember. He wrote the reviews for the Times
Oh
of India.
yes, of course. Oh my gosh, people were terrified of him.
Terrified.
He
That's what
he
I
came
was.
and sat in the front row, and he could make or break a production with his reviews. Absolutely.
Exactly, exactly. So we were so worried and concerned. We didn't sleep that whole night waiting for the reviews to come out because as it is, we hardly got an audience. We got like 5, 7 shows. It was not like today when you could run to full houses for a long time. And if you got a bad review from Mr. Matthews, that was the end of it. So
That's right.
yes, I remember that vividly. That was a great time to have been there in Bombay at that time, growing up. And
And
in the
didn't you do Othello or Macbeth or one of those with
Yes,
Joseph?
I was in Othello too. I was in Othello with Kabir Bedi at that time.
That's right.
Yes, yes.
So
And
fantastic.
Macbeth
Mm.
too.
Please carry on. Please carry on.
Yeah, and Macbeth too. Othello and Macbeth. That was really wonderful. Alec was such a great director, Shashi.
Oh yes, he directed me in Oliver in
Oh
1968,
yes, that's
where I
right.
was the Artful Dodger,
That's
and
right.
he was a colorful director too. He would say things like, "Stop running around like a chicken with your head cut off," things
Yes.
like that. He would squint something. But anyway, mm.
It was one of his favorite phrases, yeah. And he
Great.
was a great list maker. And so I was a great list maker too. So we hit it off from the word go. I always constantly make lists, and I still do. And he was a great list maker. There was always this piece of paper in his pocket with his list for the day written on it. And
Uh-huh.
we got along like a house on fire because of those lists.
Fantastic. So from the days, well, I know, I mean, pen and paper are still the rage, and I won't say they'll ever go out. But a lot has changed. A lot has changed in the past years and decades and circumstances that you talked about. You've led such a fulfilling life, Sabira Merchant, and in terms of family, in terms of work, you did radio, and then the iconic "What's the Good Word" quiz show. TV and technology has evolved greatly since then. What's your view on this transition, Sabira?
Well, in the old days, we had the markings going up on the board on a piece of cardboard that was, like 12 or 25, a person would literally go up and put it by hand. Now, of course, you have all the electronic markings. And I begged Doordarshan in those days to please do some electronic markings. They said there's too much money to spend, we can't afford it. And that's exactly how the show had a natural death. But otherwise, it was just going great guns. It was doing so well. And I can't believe to this day that it ran for 15 long years. I mean, people have grown up watching that program, and that we could research so many different words every time and enact them at certain times too. And we had live things going on stage, like people coming to chop or dice or cook something, and then they would guess, the audience and the people on the program would guess what that particular action was, or an Indian dance mudra, or somebody singing something. So that made it very, very sort of alive and happening, not only for those back at home, but for the studio audience as well. And we had a great studio audience. And remember, in those days, there was no Googling. So I had to really sit there and research all that from the encyclopedia, all the questions that I would ask. So it was very hard work. That was the hardest period, really, of my life, researching for that program.
So great. I mean, you've achieved so much, and I'm sure that the humility speaks when you talk about your journey. And I'm sure it's not been easy. It would not have been easy to get to where you have. Family would have played a beautiful role as well. Tell us something about your parents, about your family who've helped you in getting to this level and getting through life.
Which you speak about my parents, you see, the first thing that I mentioned in the book, start the book off by saying that I was an adopted child. So I didn't have that presence of my real parents being there for me or advising me or telling me, but my adopted father was so wonderful. He was a great man and a fine disciplinarian. And he taught me the values that go into life. And he also taught me how to stand up and speak for myself, which is a big thing that he did. He was a very, very affable human being and well loved by the community at large. So I learned a lot from my dad. And unfortunately, I didn't have much to do with my real parents or my siblings because they were in Pakistan. And yes, and they had gone, my father was Jinnah's right-hand architect. So he'd gone with Mr. Jinnah and left all his properties, everything in India, and just moved to Pakistan. So I sort of kind of lost touch with them, but we kept in touch about once or twice a year or something like that. But I didn't have the joy of being with my siblings. I had a younger adopted brother, and there was a whole story in the book about my being so-called lucky child, being sent to people's homes, and they would immediately have an offspring. So that's there in the book too.
Well, that's a way of looking at life, and beautiful indeed. So I'm sure we'll get to read more of this and other episodes from your life and learnings there in Veera when we pick up the book and read through. So we're going to pick it up and from front to the end, read it through. For you, which was the favorite chapter and why?
Oh, well, I guess my favorite chapter was on the theater, because that's really been in my systems for such a long time, that anything I did with theater is something that still excites me and still moves me on. So I would guess that's my favorite chapter, the theater chapter.
Wonderful, the chapter on theatre. Now, let me bring in Dr. Tharoor and yourself together. I know you've talked about the journey that you've had through the Othello and more, but you also share uh, the love for art, including owning pieces by none other than M.F. Hussain as well. Tell us a little more about your love and admiration of for art. Dr. Tharoor, this is a question for you.
Well, I mean, I really am an amateur. I don't claim any great expertise. And so, I'm a sort of related by marriage, by her marriage to Anjali Ella Menon. And when I was invited by friends who were putting together a book on her to write an essay of art appreciation, I said, no, I just don't feel qualified. I know what I like, enjoy looking at art, but I don't consider myself an expert. And it's more the way, you go to a museum and you appreciate both the surface of a painting, that is the texture, the image, the quality of joy it gives you or beauty that it imparts to you, and you also have a sense of what lies behind the surface of a painting, the significance, the meaning, the thoughts it sparks in your mind. So that, to me, the combination of those two experiences is the experience of art. But I think that people who write knowledgeably about art need to know much more than I do. They need to know about texture and the use of colors and perspectives, and the way in which the technique of the artist has embellished or undermined what he or she is trying to do, and so on. I have none of those. I've had no art education. So I'm just an amateur in the literal sense of the term, somebody who loves, somebody who goes to look, to watch, to enjoy, and that's it. And I don't claim at all to be an authority on art, whereas I think Sabira is a much more serious artist and collector. I collect pieces that give me pleasure, and that's it. It's really nothing more profound than that.
But
You,
really, we just do that, honestly, Shashi. We do that because it gives us pleasure more than anything else. You own a piece because when you look at it, you have a certain feeling, either some parts of peace, sense of peace, or a sense of clarity, or a sense of disturbance, even. So I guess it's that's what some of the paintings that I have churn me up, and if a little bit like a disturbing, but it excites me. It excites me to go and do things. So I guess that's why we own paintings, or we like paintings, or you go to
That's right.
exhibitions.
And sometimes the things we have in our walls have a story behind them that mean more to us than to any stranger coming to our home and looking at them on our walls.
Of
But
course.
that too has a significance for us, either the circumstances in which we acquired it or the story behind that painting's making, whatever it may be. I've got two or three such examples in my own living room, and I'm very happy to talk about them to friends who are interested, but I'm also very happy to just let them be there for, for my own pleasure, because that's ultimately all the purpose they serve, in my view.
we would love to have a separate conversation on the art that each of you carries and the meaning behind it. I'm sure we can do an infinite amount of conversation there. Let me come back to you, Ms. Merchant. In terms of, you've seen now both as personalities, both you and Dr. Tharoor are out there. In fact, you've seen the journey of India uh, as developing as a face where India has India and Indians have carried more finesse, have become more complete as communicators, as personalities, and more. So, Sabira Merchant, if I can ask you, what are your learnings? What have your lessons been from your journey? Not in terms of the coaching sense or the training sense, but your lessons from your journey, which you would share with women or men of today.
Well,
That
with anybody, really. I mean, I think my journey has taught me that you have to be very honest in life, honest with yourself and with people. So honesty is one of the principles that I stand by. And the biggest thing that I think, especially, and that is what I love about theater, is the discipline that it gives you. You have to be so utterly disciplined. You have to know exactly which line to say when, and when that person is going to take a move towards you, a step towards you, and what your reaction will be towards that person. So, discipline and honesty and principles. And I think if you have your set of principles and you stay by them and you hang by them, I think those are the three important qualities that one has and one should stand by. I mean, people have different qualities that they would name, but for me, these three are very important, especially the discipline part of it. Like, for instance, exercising. Now, every day I have a trainer who comes in, and it's been going on even since the lockdown, and it's been going on for the last 25 years that I have somebody coming in, because I know the body is actually growing older, really. It needs more training than even before. So it's important to keep yourself physically fit as well, as much as is possible. So I think that fitness also becomes part of a daily regime, a kind of a discipline, again, if you want to call it of any kind. So that's what's
Absolutely.
important to me, yes.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, Dr. Tharoor, a question for you. You've lived a journey of different colors, and I think if there were I'm sure there are multiple are, and of course we've read so many books that you've presented to us. Tell us your three lessons.
Oh my word, that I wasn't prepared for, the Deepshika. I'd really have to think it through. I think the most important thing is to know yourself, know what you're capable of, know what matters to you, know what you're good at. All of that. I often tell young people when I address school audiences or college audiences, uh, just be the best version of yourself that you can be, because nobody else can be you. Just be you, but first understand who you are and what you're capable of, and then live up to it. Don't let yourself down. I think that's the single most important message. Another one that as a parent I kept inflicting on my kids was never give up. Keep trying. I mean, ultimately, if something is worth attempting, it's worth attempting. Then go ahead and do it. And the Gita teaches us, don't worry about setbacks. Or don't worry about whether you succeed or fail. If it's the right thing to do, it's worth doing, and it's worth doing right. So I think that's the second big lesson. And the third, I suppose, would probably be to pick yourself up from setbacks, because I don't really think there's anyone on earth who succeeded who hasn't had setbacks. They may vary enormously. Sabira's was a personal emotional setback as a child. Others may have, financial setbacks, tragedies at home. There are all sorts of different ways in which you can find yourself either failing or disappointing or being judged harshly by the world. Remember to pick yourself up and go on, because ultimately, don't let your failures define you. And that'll only happen if you succumb to them. If you say, all right, I'm going to pick myself up and dust myself off and carry on, you will, in fact, I think, be a far better human being for what you've learned from your setbacks and defeats. So those are three off the top of my head, but you didn't warn me about the Deepika.
Fantastic. Know yourself and pick yourself up, and of course, the discipline and the honesty that Sabira Merchant talked about.
Sabira mentioned, yeah.
Fantastic. So at this point of time, may I request questions from the audiences? I know that just a few have joined us here as well, but we do have questions coming in online, which, Niransh, if you could share those with me here. And then we can take that forward. Meanwhile, any final thoughts, any closing thoughts, Dr. Tharoor, that you have on the book?
Well,
And
I do think it's a delightful, eye-opening book. It's been rather well put together by Sabira and the journalist she cooperated with, Ms. Parik. I would say that it really is a rewarding read, and of course, I had a special interest in that. I knew the person being written about, but even people who don't, in my view, will have a lot of eye-opening discoveries and pleasures. And then, of course, there is, if you like, the slightly, the usual curiosity challenge of finding out more about the celebrity she trained to speak properly and think properly and so on, and etiquette and diction, and also about the smarts required in some of these international contests. I love that little story, Sabira, which you tell about who was the contestant? Was it Lara Datta, I think, who was asked, India used to export tea, now you export IT, and here you are, India's exporting beauty. What is going to be the next tea? And apparently she quickly replied, creativity, and went on to win. And I thought that was a great story. So that would be my
Yes.
my clinching anecdote for this. I've got to leave you all after that. I'm sure the questions from the audience, Sabira will answer, but I have, I'm afraid, another commitment that I have to rush to. But I do want to say that the book was fun. I hope that everyone will read it, and there are lots of fun stories to go with it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you. Thank you so much, Shashi. Thank you so much for your time and all the love that you put into that saying. Thank you so much.
All
Thank
the very best for the success of the book, and
Thank you.
thank
Thank you.
you, Deepshika. All the best, Sabira.
thank you, Dr. Tharoor.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Wonderful. So, Sabina, your closing thoughts on the book, and I definitely have one question. One is that, in fact, two questions which are coming in from the audiences through our chats is which is so it's a you say it's a full life as a memoir, but what is that one thing that you've not included in the book, which you thought that you should?
The one thing that I missed out on, if you ask me, during my life, the one thing that I feel I could have done and I didn't do, and which is just lying there, is not going to college. I really wish I had had the chance to go to college, but I got out of school and so quickly got married that there was no time. And then I had the children, and then there was the theater, so there was just no time to really go out there and get a college education. But I missed out on that. I feel that that's the one thing that I wish I had done, and which lies still in the state of flux. So that's what it is.
I'm sure
So
a lot of people are jealous and they want to go back. At least I would love to. If you are the outcome of that journey, I would love to go back and not do college again, and look at what we have with us, Sabina.
yes,
So beautiful indeed. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time. And as Dr. Tharoor said, have a fantastically successful book. And we look forward to reading it. And all our audiences are excited and thankful that you chose to spend this time with us.
my pleasure. Thank you so much, Deepshika.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.